seen that report, I did tell you at the beginning of this program that conference did hold yesterday, the meeting of ECOWAS heads of state happening right here in Abuja, and the mood, especially in terms of how the city was set up, welcoming the heads of state and government in the ECOWAS region. Well, to discuss some of the outcome, as reported by our correspondent there, Larry Lasisi, from that particular meeting, we have with us this morning Ambassador Hassan Mohammed Hassan, was the former Deputy Chief of Mission and Permanent Observer to the Organization of American States. He's also an economist and member of the APC BOT of APC Professionals Forum. Ambassador, welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you, Mope. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the last time we saw a meeting like this, very interesting outcomes. The coup from Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso were high on the priorities list.
Right.
And ECOWAS was reeling out sanctions, saying what they would stand for and what they would not stand for. There were fears in the air as to whether or not Nigeria or even the ECOWAS states were going to invade Niger. But this particular meeting, we're now saying that the conversation is now shifting into what could have caused those coups in the very first instance. Is this a very good shift in position?
Absolutely. It's a very good shift in position because fighting war itself is a capital project that ECOWAS will not want to embark on. And right now, the easier way, which I'm happy ECOWAS has embarked upon, is trying to know what are the bases that causes, what are the reasons for coups. So through this, I'm sure they will find solution to most of our problems. And in West Africa, you have, it's not only Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but there were skirmishes in Gabon, skirmishes in Sierra Leone. So if all our leaders come together and look at the issues critically, I'm sure they'll find solution.
Well, we have one, at least, good story to tell since the last time that the ECOWAS leaders met, which is the situation in Liberia.
Yeah.
Successfully, an election was held there, and the incumbent president, George Weah, acknowledged defeat, and congratulated his opponent, Joseph Boakai,
That's right.
Who has now emerged as president of the country, although he's yet to be sworn in. And we see there that ECOWAS leaders stood up to give him a standing ovation for doing that.
That's true.
Do you think, well, that might be commendable, and some people say, oh, that's an incentive. You have to ask, are we really at the point where, it's like as if our leaders are being treated like school children. Oh, clap for him for doing the right thing. Shouldn't that be taken for granted?
It shouldn't be, because in Africa, the tradition or the norm is people cling on to power. So anybody that is doing something contrary to that deserves an applause. And I believe George Weah, President George Weah, I congratulate him, I commend him. And similar to what happened during Goodluck Jonathan and Buhari. And this gave way to progress, it eliminates rancor that may eventually put a specific country in trouble. So these approaches, I believe, if they are not, as you said, school children applauding them for what they should do, but I believe this approach is a mild way of saying, yeah, thank you, and we appreciate it.
Well, there are countries, even within the West African sub-region now, that this is now being taken for granted. I cannot imagine, for instance, that a Ghanaian president loses an election and, in a meeting of ECOWAS leaders, he's, applauded for having, congratulated his opponent. It would seem that in some countries, democracy has now come to stay. They have taken it that it has indeed come to settle down, and a transition from one government to the other, be it in opposition or be it the ruling party, is now running very smoothly. Do you think that if this were, and I don't know if you agree with me, so you can tell me if you think that if this were a Ghanaian president, would we have been seeing the same kind of applause?
Yeah, I think so, because even though Ghana has been, the transition in that country has been relatively smooth, but if someone does something good, it's good to praise that fellow.
Okay. I cannot argue with that.
Okay.
I mean, because indeed, things could have gone all right. And I had the privilege to be in Liberia, and I do know that for the people of Liberia, peace was, topmost on their agenda. So,
that's right. Based on their experiences of civil war, of 10 years civil war, chopping people's hands, murdering thousands, hundreds of thousands, and that was like Sierra Leone and Liberia. That was it gave the impetus for the creation of ECOWAS, and it costed West African countries a lot. So if we can go the way of peace, I think is better.
So if the way to encourage our leaders to do more is just an applause, why not? I mean, who can fault that? But let me ask you, let me take you up on this issue of, creating a business environment, because I think that the president of the meeting, when he convened, when he started to, say why they were gathered, talked about how the ECOWAS region needed to make itself more attractive to foreign direct investment, and how they needed to do more. And I think it's very important that sometimes, much as we've been focusing on the politics in recent times, the very first word in the abbreviation or the acronym ECOWAS, economic community, they came together for economic reasons.
Right.
Would you say that when you look at how we have been, some of the progresses that have been made, or some of the initiatives that have been undertaken in recent times, there has been greater focus on that economic aspect of the economic community coming together? Yeah,
the economic community also encompasses political cooperation. And so far, I believe ECOWAS has done relatively well when you compare them with, SADC, for example, or the Economic Community of East African States. ECOWAS, I believe, have done well, and I give them a pass mark because we have embarked on a lot of projects: health care, economy as a whole, and political associations, and trying to bring up almost all facets of our lives. So ECOWAS might be struggling, but when you see the mammoth of job before them and how far they have acquitted themselves from discharging those responsibilities, I believe, and again, there are constraints. We have financial constraints, we have political constraints, we have so many things. So I think, by and large, we can't afford to look at ECOWAS as if it's a drain on the system. ECOWAS has done very well.
But it certainly could be doing much more.
Oh yeah, it certainly could be doing much more. But even at the UN, they consider ECOWAS, they have respect for the organization. Yes.
Because I'm looking at, for instance, the EU.
Yes.
And the progress that they were able to make over a period. When you look at, just where they currently are, the fact that, many more members want to join the EU for a number of reasons, of course, and they now are the ones setting conditions and saying, no, you have to do this, you have to do that, you must be this, you must be that before you can, join us. Here we have 3 countries that have now been, bans have been placed on them, not just bans, well, sanctions have been placed on them,
yes.
And you find a situation whereby rather than trying to see how it is they can meet the criteria and see how they can join the economic community back as a result of some of the incentives that they have received or they're currently missing out on, you find a situation where they're forming their own organization. Well, ECOWAS has said, we don't recognize that. We will resist every attempt for you to do a thing like that, But doesn't it speak to the fact that, or doesn't it speak to, the powers that ECOWAS by itself wields? You would think that the incentives alone would discourage any other group from trying to, follow another path, so to speak.
Yeah, when you look at ECOWAS, comparing ECOWAS to European Economic Communities, European Community, EU, you're not being very fair to ECOWAS because ECOWAS is, they have a lot of constraints, economic, political, social, and also there are so many issues of health problems and all this. And coming to the formation of the association or coming together of Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, they are forming what you call the Sahel Association. But they have not, they are only sanctioned. They have not been driven out of ECOWAS. They are still members, but they have been suspended. So what I will want to suggest to ECOWAS leaders is they tread softly. These guys, they've been offended, and they take it as...
They've been offended?
Yeah, they take it as if they've been offended. They take it as if they have been offended. I'm not saying they've been offended, but that is their own understanding. And that's because the whole West African governments condemned the coup, and they are rightly so. They have the right to condemn because it's ECOWAS, EU, and all over the world. So they see as if they've now been boxed into a corner. They are struggling. So let's do it in a diplomatic fashion. Treat them very well to an extent. Sometimes it may be a bit ridiculous, but we can get them back to the negotiating table, and we don't raise issue about their association initially, but let's drive them to a point when they will accept handing over and all this. And actors, if we push them to a point when they hand over to civilian governments, the modus operandi may change, and their thinking and outlook might be something different. So we just have to manage this situation, because ECOWAS is not, it won't be good for ECOWAS to be fractured. It won't be good.
You see a situation where it can happen? Being fractured?
Yeah, they have initiated it. They have initiated it.
Okay.
Yes, but we shouldn't. The governments of ECOWAS now, the way they are going about it is the best way. They not laying emphasis on their association. They lay emphasis on ECOWAS, and eventually they will come to an understanding.
Okay, well, let's quickly take a break at this point. I know that we also have other guests who will also be weighing in on this matter. And we'll take their viewpoints when we come back from this break. Please stay with us.
Well, you're welcome back. Let's expand the conversation now. Yes, there's diplomacy going on within member countries within ECOWAS, but there's also the issue of governance, which President Tinubu talked about. Good governance, I should say. I want to bring in Mr. Yudisa Tanko, who's the chief spokesman of the Labour Party's Presidential Campaign Council, who joins us virtually this morning from Kaduna, northwest Nigeria. It's good to have you on the program, Mr. Yudisa Tanko. I just want to get your thoughts on, yes, there's a diplomacy, but then there's good governance. And I think at the heart of the conversation is good governance. And the president, President Bola Tinubu, spoke specifically about that, saying that good governance might just be the solution to authoritarian, forceful takeover of government, particularly in the ECOWAS region. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. If that is a clear solution, then how much of good governance would you say we have? Maybe if you can't speak for the sub-region in Nigeria here.
Okay, it is very important. Don't mount issues, but we put action to them. Action to them meaning that you do what you say, and then the feeling will be symbiotic between you and the people. Let me give you a clear-cut example. It is very, very clear that the doctrines of democracy actually rely basically on the people. The people are the main source of your power, and the people are the one that you are supposed to deliver the dividends of democracy to. Now, in the case where the dividends of democracy is not delivered clearly, it creates apathy, it creates distrust, it makes the people feel unwanted. When they know, ab initio, that actually they are the one that give you that particular power, collective power for you to lead them and lead them aright. And that is where the word good governance comes in. Good governance means providing for the needs of the people. Don't give them what you think they need, but what they tell you that they need. Most of the times, most leaders in the ECOWAS sub-region completely, they do what they feel like doing. I saw a video of a leader in Guinea-Bissau. He was all dressed up in white. He was supposed to be the leader, all dressed up in white, looking so fashionable. The people around him and his young children were just around him, looking so wonderfully beautiful. But when you look at the people on the other side, even the road in which he applied was completely untarred. The people are looking so dejected. They are looking neglected. And that, of course, does not reflect good governance. Now, these are the basics that leads to apathy and make the people feel very, very aggrieved. So what do they look for? They look for those who can give them this succor, who can take care of their needs. Do you know, for example, that one of the things that made the Liberian election, just like as I read, was that the Liberian election was led by the Electoral Commission on good planning and execution. That means the process seems to be in the interest of the people. In fact, it was internally funded. It was not funded by international donors, just like we usually have in Nigeria. Now, there was similar chances that the election was actually free and fair. And that, of course, resulted to George Weah, the president, then accepting the result of the election. Now, these are processes that lead to good governance. When you have good processes that emanated into good elections, the people will see good governance in display. And that, of course, is very important. As in Nigerian case, I'm telling you, we have not seen, there may have been some slight, improvement in some states, but generally, the people are totally been neglected. And that is causing a lot of apathy and distrust within the system.
So speak to us about where we're getting it wrong then. And I think you've also spoken about the sub-region largely, and we've seen the situation, the indices, they're quite clear when it comes to poverty, the economy, and the rest. We have been on this democratic journey for decades now, some even longer than Nigeria. We have democracies that are even older than Nigeria, on the continent. So what exactly is the issue? Is it that democracy, what we have borrowed, whether you like it or not, borrowed from other climes, is not fit for our situation in Nigeria, and maybe it's time to explore something that is well tailored to our realities here in Nigeria? Some would say it's like wearing a winter jacket which you took from Canada. You're wearing it here in Nigeria where the temperature is really high. It wouldn't work. It doesn't make sense. So what exactly is the problem? Is it that we're using the wrong system, or the people who are using that system aren't using it appropriately? Have you been able to diagnose this? Because I know you've been involved with other political movements aside the Labour Party.
Research has shown that the principle of democracy is being negated by our leaders. Democracy is good because there's a feedback, there's a connectivity within the people and the leaders. But if the principle of leadership is being negated, it causes a problem. Now, let me give you an example. We've had opportunities of having military leadership. Some of the military leadership can be adjoined to be good. We remember the case of Murtala Muhammad, you know, who was pro-people, and it was seen clearly. But of course, it was an autocratic leadership. It's a one-way ticket. You give an order, nobody gives you a feedback, so you cannot even react. But in the case of democracy, there's a voice of the people. In fact, the people are the one who decide. But the major problem we have as a people in practicing democracy is that this particular winner takes all, I must win at all costs. It's embarrassing if I am the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and somebody come and defeat me, and so I look stupid. That how can I allow them to defeat me after I have all the powers to use to continue to put myself in power? But the leaders forget that they can only be in that power for a certain period of time. They cannot go beyond that. So they should apply the doctrine of the principle of the interest of the people, knowing fully well that if they do the right thing, the people remain with them for a very long time, even after they've left office. But if they do bad, the people continue to look at them with pain and pang and reflect on their bad deeds. So the principle of democracy is about doing the good thing for the interest of the people. You can only apply and call for support and vote from the people. You cannot force yourself on them. The moment they see that there's a slight interest in forcing yourself onto them, they look at you with disdain, disrespect. The issue of illegality and legitimacy come into being, just like what we are still seeing in some of the elections that has happened in Nigeria. But if they know they elected you and they make sure that you are their president, they will stand by you, work together with you in symbiotic to ensure that whatever kind of dividends you intend to give to them is being delivered. But where there is a discord, they don't work with you. They only allow you to do whatever you want to do unto them. And they keep on praying to you, praying against you, even in the mosques and the churches, that you may not survive that particular position. This is happening. So what we need to do is appeal to our leaders who find themselves in the position of power to apply the principles of democracy, which is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Once that is done, you will see that the country will grow. The continent itself will grow. There will be production. There will be innovative. There will be creativeness. There will be solid relationship between the different ethnic groups, because you do not favor one group against other. The moment you do that, that is where the discord comes, and then you find yourself in a very undeveloped country, just like we are seeing right now.
Well, a lot for African leaders to chew on, and we hope that they're watching either directly or by proxy, such that actions can be taken. We also have, our guest who joins us via Zoom, Mr. Adebayo Oluwake, Global Affairs Analyst. And I'm coming to you now, Mr. Oluwake. I wonder if you began following the conversation from the beginning. Our guest in Abuja acknowledged what seems to be a paradigm shift, following this meeting with ECOWAS leaders in Abuja, the presidential villa. A shift from what seems to be aggression, particularly after the Niger coup, to a calmer stance now, reflecting on the state of governance in Africa. I wonder if this is also reflective of the weakness of the instrumentality of ECOWAS itself to respond to coups, particularly if you recall that these coups had been on for quite some time. Even under former President Muhammadu Buhari, the most that he could do at that time was to call for the European Union to support sanctions against coupists in Africa. Do you acknowledge this, Mr. Oluwake?
Yes, good morning and thank you for having me. I agree completely that the speech we heard especially from President Bola Tinubu as chair of the Authority of Heads of State of ECOWAS, was a paradigm shift. Not just from him, but if you look at all the other leaders who superintend over sub-regional instruments like SADC, the Southern African Development Community, or the East African Customs Union, Central African Customs Union and the East African Community, we've never had the leadership of those sub-regional economic communities speaking the way President Tinubu spoke yesterday. I also feel that it is a response to the criticism that has come from many observers that ECOWAS responds, or rather reacts, without actually dealing with the root causes of the unconstitutional changes in power that we have been having. Remember that when we had what was then the Organization of African Unity, OAU, which has metamorphosed into the African Union, there was a cardinal principle in the OAU at the time, which was what was called the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of member states. But that has changed because, especially with the Democracy and Good Governance Protocol of ECOWAS, which was adopted in 2001, ECOWAS came out boldly to say that you cannot have an unconstitutional change of government, which was a demonstration of the fact that it will intervene in the internal affairs of its member states if they went wrong. And we saw that done during the regime of General Sani Abacha, when ECOMOG reversed the coup by Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Paul Koroma in Sierra Leone. He had overthrown the elected president, President Ahmad Tejan Kaba. That coup was reversed in an operation led by Brigadier General Maxwell Kobe of the Nigerian Army. So we have seen ECOWAS come a long way. That speech is pointing us into a new direction. But I also think that it is also a tacit admission by ECOWAS that it had not reflected deeply before it started reacting to the spate of coups that we have had. Hopefully, it's now determined to hold its members, its leaders accountable.
But Mr. Loake, when you look at the alliance that Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso are forming now, the rejection of tax domination by France, and on the other hand, defense pact, isn't it also instructive, particularly with regards to the African unity that the founding fathers of the African Union had spoken of in the era of independence? Regardless of the fact that anyway, it's coming with, a type of government that is not so attractive. Well,
the alliance being formed, which President Tinubu described as a distraction, by the way, when he was speaking yesterday, I see this as more of grandstanding. And why do I say that? At the moment, those three countries are in dire straits in terms of their geopolitical and geosecurity strategic calculations. They're in dire straits. Burkina Faso is having significant threat from jihadi forces. It has not made any significant progress against them. Guinea doesn't have any jihadi threat, and Guinea is a coastal country. So Guinea is not particularly as exposed as Burkina Faso and Mali, that are landlocked countries. But Guinea is under sanctions nonetheless, from ECOWAS as well as from the EU. And then when you look at Mali, Mali has also lost significant territory to jihadi forces. Only about a week ago, the Malian forces were able to recapture Kidal. Kidal is particularly significant in the geopolitical calculations, for Mali, and in its fight to regain all lost territories by jihadis. But when you put all of this together, you find out that these two countries in particular, Burkina Faso and Mali, are significantly on the back foot in terms of security. Economically, they are under sanctions. So I feel strongly that the so-called alliance is essentially just to see how they can harness the relationship between the three of them, because they are all contiguous, and see how they can benefit. especially since Guinea will keep its ports open for goods to come in, even if they are not going to admit that publicly. Now, not only are these three countries trying to have this so-called alliance, to try to see how they can survive by working together, but we shouldn't forget that even Sierra Leone, which to my surprise, ECOWAS is strongly backing Madabio. Madabio had already been fraternizing with the military leadership in Guinea, and when he had his own coup scare just a couple of weeks, 2 weeks back, to me, I said maybe it was something to bring him home to reality, because he was defying ECOWAS, he was defying the AU, and he was defying the UN. So Sierra Leone's position also is not exactly too clear. But I don't think that these countries have the weight to surmount the pressures that ECOWAS is imposing on them. I think their action at the moment is just optics, for the optics, basically.
Well, the coming days will be telling, and I'm going to follow up on much of what you said. I'm coming to you now, Ambassador Hassan in Abuja. As you reflect on much of what Mr. Olowake has said, how will the change in stance, first of all, of the ECOWAS leaders following this meeting will deter further coups in Africa? And do you agree that these alliances being formed by these coupists, this military leaderships in these three countries, is not well thought out, according to Mr. Olowake?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mr. Olowake stated it very succinctly. The approach should be carrot and stick. Where they've done well, we commend them. Where they did wrong, we not sanction them, but we talk to them in a way that they could understand. So the approach to having the good governance model is we have what we call peer review mechanisms. The peer review mechanisms, we have parameters within which what is the ideal situation for a good government. And we rate those governments of West African states against those parameters. Where somebody is doing very well, we commend that state. Where somebody is doing very badly, we tell them you need to improve. That is the way to go about it. And also we have to try to understand their situations at home. The situations at home might be completely different from what we have in our respective countries. So that is a very serious factor. So if we understand where they are coming up and where things are happening, that gives us a very good knowledge of what is happening in particular states, and it gives us where we can come in with some input and where we can come in with some improvement or suggestions.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see, just how much the ECOWAS is able to sustain this talk. I mean, because part of what people will be looking to see is whether or not ECOWAS could also evolve into an organization where there is peer review. When they start to talk about good governance and the fact that they need to maintain stability for them to be able to achieve the economic objectives of their coming together in the very first instance, people will say that it should go beyond transiting from one government to the other, or just having elections. In terms of, because you talked about some of the other indices, for instance, investments in health, investments in education. There needs to be big conversations around what each member state is doing and how it can be done better. So let me go to you, Mr. Olowake. I don't know if you can, I hope you can hear me this time around. I'd like to know whether you think that ECOWAS is actually making the right moves in this direction. Yes, just last week we saw them hand out checks. I think, of about $250,000 to some member states that are still dealing with fistula, gynecological fistula. I'm looking for is it obstetric fistula? Yeah, that's the right word. Obstetric fistula. They gave some member states who are still dealing with this checks to be able to handle that particular problem in their states. But beyond that, do you think that ECOWAS is actually looking at becoming an organization where members can review themselves to see how one is doing better than the other in certain areas and coming up to par?
Absolutely, Mark, but that's the way to go, actually. If you look at ECOWAS, they've been pretty strong in supporting political transitions when states are having elections. And yesterday, President Tinubu was also talking about providing technical and material support for the transitions in Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso, if those countries agree on a short and quick transition to democracy. But ECOWAS should go beyond that completely. I agree. His Excellency Ali Toure, the chairperson of the ECOWAS Commission, while he was talking yesterday, complained that member states are no longer remitting part of the customs dues, the percentage of the customs dues that they are supposed to remit to ECOWAS. And he was asking the chairman of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State to prevail on those member states to fulfill their obligations. When ECOWAS is able to raise its own funds, it's going to be able to do a lot more in social sectors. ECOWAS also, in fact, has, for me, no choice than to see how it can generate funding within the community. Because so far, it has often depended a lot on partners, especially the European Union. And part of the problems why, for example, it couldn't enforce its decisions on Niger was because the position of most of the citizens of ECOWAS, with regard to the Nigerian problem, was that we needed to support our own people and not be an instrument in the hands of France or be an instrument in the hands of the European Union. So without ECOWAS being able to generate its own funds to put into social sectors in member states and having to depend on foreign institutions, its own sovereignty in terms of its political will and decisions could always be interpreted to be that of these external powers who are financing it. But I believe that there's enough within the sub-region, mineral resources and all that, especially if ECOWAS improves its collection and if there's a political will by member states to provide funds for these social sector interventions.
Well, thank you for your response. Let me go to Mr. Tanko now. I'd like to know whether you think that the sanctions that have been put in place are enough to deter members from, not doing the right thing when it comes to elections having been conducted in their states, and rightful people have been put in place. We have a situation whereby coups have happened in a number of states within the ECOWAS sub-region. Do you think that the sanctions that have been in place have been sufficient to deter members in this regard?
Well, the truth is that sanctions can only be effective on any nation when the nation that is under sanction sees that those who are actually giving out the sanction on its own country have also legitimate issues not hanging on them. What I mean is that if there's a niche within them and then the country that is already under sanction, if a country, for example, like Burkina Faso or Niger or Mali or Guinea, as the case may be, see that all the other ECOWAS countries have enough influence on that particular country that is being under sanction, they will oblige. So you can put up a lot of sanction on the country, but the effectiveness will be very, very slow, especially when the country sees itself as still surviving on its own. Because the sanctions that were being given are economic sanctions. And so, economic sanctions, how effective or how influential have been the other countries on that country? Just like we've already explained now, we have not gotten enough influence on all of this. So that watered down the sanction. So the sanction is not really that effective. In fact, what will end up is a moral suasion and persuasion that may end up working in certain ways, but not really sanction as the case may be. Because if you notice, most of the people who are affected in Niger, for example, you will see that the people were jubilant. They were jubilant about the coup. That means that they were happy that certain situation took place. But when Nigeria was making the position of possible military intervention and the rest of them, they were like a resistance by the people. Resistance with abusive language on our own country. And I know it happens on other ones too. So you see, that means that we have not really have more or less like a lot of power that we thought we have on Niger because of our closeness. Yes, of course, we give them electricity and all of that, but then Niger is looking at itself and saying, look, I can do without Nigeria. I can survive without Nigeria. I can survive without Ghana. I can survive without Togo. I can survive without any of these other countries. So,
well, Mr. Tanko, it will be very interesting to do a poll in that country now and see how many months after whether or not the people are still jubilant in terms of the rulership that they're currently experiencing in the countries where coups have taken place. But we do know that this is an ongoing conversation. It's something that we cannot finish discussing in one fell swoop. So we will thank you very much for intervening this particular morning. Mr. Yunusa Tanko is the chief spokesman of the Labour Party presidential campaign.
Thank you very much for having me. God bless Nigeria.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. We've also had with us Ambassador, just before we come to you, Ambassador, Mr. Adebayo Oluwake, who's a global affairs analyst. We have to thank you so much for joining the conversation this morning on Sunrise Daily. And of course, I've had with me here in the studio Ambassador Hassan Mohammed Hassan, former Deputy Chief of Mission and Permanent Observer to the Organization of American States, an economist and also a member of the APC BOT of APC Professionals Forum. Mouthful there. Well, thank you so much for coming on as well.
Thank you very much, and God bless Nigeria.
Amen. Well, time has been fast spent this morning. We have to apologize to our viewers. Some who have taken pains to send very lengthy emails. We see you, Olagunjo Oladele and Abiru Kenneth. Thank you so much for sending your feedback. We have to say, well, thank you so much for watching this beautiful Monday morning. We hope that you have a very productive week. Amal, where were you, sir?
Indeed, thank you for watching. Have a blessed week ahead. I am Bukola Koka.
Hey, go out there and win. All right, I'm Kayode Kikile. Goodbye.